Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience as we worked our way through the breakout transition from the general session. So we truly appreciate your understanding, but as we all know, these are very unpredictable times. So welcome to today's session, How to Optimize Your LinkedIn Profile and Enhance Your Personal Brand. My name is Will Turkey and I'm with Visit Charlotte. And before we begin, I'd like to share a few housekeeping notes. Today we're using EQ's Hive platform. We wanted to provide a few tips on how to make the most of your experience today. Join the session chat to share your thoughts on the content and connect, which it already looks like a lot of you already gotten familiar with that. And we encourage you to visit the exhibitor links in the lobby to learn more about our partners who have helped put this event together. Spend some time visiting our sponsor page in the exhibitors section to see how they can support your experience. If you have any technical support questions, feel free to type your question into the chat box, or you can email capital@pcma.org for prompt assistance. If you have questions for the speaker, please use the Q&A tab function to address your question, and look under the Published tab of the section to upvote questions that have already been asked. So be on the lookout for questions that you might already have, and you can actually push them to the head of the line. And Amy will be addressing those questions at the end of the session today. On-demand sessions, like Anissa mentioned earlier, are available after the conference for 24/7 for your viewing pleasure for 90 days following the conference. So you'll be able to access the other sessions that you were not able to attend since you joined us today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Amy Thompson. Amy is a strategist, content creator, and storyteller with extensive experience in marketing and communications, membership development, and volunteer management. She has worked in a variety of business environments ranging from Fortune 500 to professional associations. Amy is incredibly passionate about volunteerism within the association and nonprofit community, and currently serves as a co-chair of the Association Forum's Content Working Group, as well as a mentor to the forum's emerging leaders. She also serves on the board of directors for EverThrive Illinois, a nonprofit focused on improving health of women, children, and families throughout Illinois. Please join me in welcoming Amy Thompson.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Just going to make sure our slides are ready to go here. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for hanging in with all of us today. I really appreciate it. So my presentation is going to be a little bit different than some presentations you may have attended during these COVID times. You know, I love presentations that are really inspirational, that talk about resilience, and really talk about how to get through these difficult times. But I also wanted to provide a counterbalance to that by talking about some tactical, actionable information you can all use to build your personal brands. So that's what we're going to focus on today, specifically building your brand on LinkedIn. So setting the stage, we are going to be talking about defining what personal branding is. I will be talking about how to build an all-star LinkedIn profile. And we'll also be talking about how to engage with content and to create content on the platform. And you don't need to be a marketer to be great at creating LinkedIn content. And we'll talk about why. Will did a nice introduction. My name is Amy Thompson, and I'm the marketing director at the Congress of Neurological Surgeons. Actually, for the next 2 days, I will be moving on. I secured a role as an executive director of a medical society, so I'll be heading over to oversee the American Medical Quality Association in a few days here. So what's LinkedIn? You know, when thinking about how to structure this presentation, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have different degrees of experience with the platform. I'm sure everybody who's attending today has heard of the platform. But what I want to do today is to provide a little bit of LinkedIn 101, but also 201 for those of you who are a little bit more well-versed in LinkedIn. So what is LinkedIn? It was established in 2003. and purchased by Microsoft in 2016. So as we look at how LinkedIn evolves, I think it'll be interesting to look at how it evolves in the context of being owned by Microsoft. So many of us, when we're focused on our resumes and CVs, we're doing those in Word documents, saving them as PDFs. So can we look at how LinkedIn might perhaps be integrated within some of the Microsoft suite to create a truly interactive resume or CV? And then LinkedIn, as far as traffic, there are 630 million users of LinkedIn. And I find it really interesting that 40% visit the platform daily. So it's certainly a platform that's still getting plenty of engagement. So let's talk about defining your personal brand. I'm here to debunk the myth that personal branding is all about you and that it's self-serving. I really see your brand as the intersection of a few things. One is the organizational brand of where you work. For those of us who are fortunate to be working right now in these times, think about the brand of the organization in which you work, the mission statement, the vision, what that brand is about. The type of messaging. For instance, I work at a medical society, so messaging is actually quite formal, but my personal brand is a little bit more informal. So then we think about our professional or employee brand. Who do you represent on behalf of that organization? And then finally, your personal brand, which is the intersection of your work experience, your personal experience, what you're doing at your organization, and what you hope to be doing in the future. So I'm going to pause on this slide for just a second, and I'd like you guys to take a look and see if you notice anything interesting in these charts. There's something that was eye-opening to me when I first looked at it, and this is a survey of recruiters that Forbes conducted in 2019. So I think it's got something interesting to reveal, and I'm curious to see if anyone can pick that out. If not, spoiler alert, I'll let you know in a second here, but I'm just curious to see if anyone has any thoughts on something that sticks out to you when you're looking at these charts. All right, so I think I'll spoil it for you. So what was most interesting to me in looking at these was that according to the recruiters surveyed, you are actually better off having no LinkedIn profile at all than a bare bones LinkedIn. And if we look at that, it's by a small amount. But still, I thought that was really interesting and enlightening. So what we're going to spend the bulk of our time together today on is how to create that all-star profile to best represent you in front of recruiters if you're searching for a job. But also posting on LinkedIn, building your personal brand is not just about trying to secure a new role. It's about building credibility, clout, getting clarity around what it is that is your personal mission and vision for yourself and your brand. So a few quick stats on recruiters. I don't want to spend a lot of time on stats here, but I think this is just really enlightening to show you how valued LinkedIn is by recruiters. So 90% of recruiters regularly use LinkedIn. 122 million people have secured an interview through LinkedIn. And I can say that I can attest to that personally. Actually, the role that I will be entering, the CEO reached out to me on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, said she had a new role, indicated interest in speaking with me. It was never something I directly applied for. It was an outreach through LinkedIn. And it was somebody I had already been connected with and had been having an ongoing conversation for 2 years. So your personal brand really is about building the long game, playing the long game. And then 90 million senior level influencers and 63 million decision makers use LinkedIn. So it really is not just for those entry level employees, but for those of you looking to secure more senior roles as well. I'll just mention even just about hiring managers, not just recruiters, right? But hiring managers are using LinkedIn as well. I know as a hiring manager, it's something I take a look at, especially when I'm looking for roles that are going to be overseeing communications or public facing. I really want to look at and see how people are presenting their own personal brands, how they're telling their own stories. For instance, there was somebody I was interviewing at my current company, and we noticed that she didn't have a LinkedIn profile. And I'll admit it gave us pause for a few moments. Now, what we found out later was during the interviewing process, she had actually hid her LinkedIn briefly. But that was something that if we hadn't discussed it, could have been potentially a negative. So now, as I mentioned, let's talk about constructing an all-star profile. And this is where I'm going to give you some tactical, actionable tips. And I know we'll be going through things quickly. So if there is something that you need more clarity on, you can ask questions at the end of the session. I will also be providing at the end of the session a link to a resource. It's an article I wrote for Association Forums magazine. And it talks about how to construct an all-star profile and provides an all-star profile checklist. So if there's anything you missed today, that checklist will be helpful for you as well. So first is a profile photo. So it's, you would think that this is fairly straightforward, but I have seen some folks who think, if it's a photo where I look good, then it's appropriate for LinkedIn. There might be a photo where you're looking really great, attending a wedding, perhaps your own, but you could tell the difference between a professional headshot and a photo that you had professionally taken, but perhaps it was a family photo, a wedding photo, etc. So I really encourage you to invest in a professional profile photo. In fact, I've seen even as late as yesterday, I saw somebody post, for those of you, who are in, most of you are in DC, but there may be those of you who are in other areas as well. There are professional photographers who've posted on LinkedIn offering low to no cost headshots for those who are unemployed or underemployed due to COVID-19. So I would certainly take a look at that. Invest in a profile photo, because what it really indicates is either you're invested enough in yourself or your organization values you enough that they have spent the time and the money to get a good headshot photo of you. And if you need something in the interim between we could get a professional photo taken and now, just do a neutral background photo with your iPhone, and that'll suffice in the meantime. Next is a background photo. So you may want to take a quick screenshot of this. The background photo is, LinkedIn will default to this blue bar in the top portion of your profile if you don't include a background photo. But I've included the correct size for a background photo. I've also included a link to where you can get some free background photo images. And again, I'll be following up with those resources at the end of the webinar as well. So next is headline. So I have circled the headline on my profile. So your headline will default to your current job title or your most recent job title. But you can update that. So I would encourage you to update that, not just to the title of your current role, but reflective of some of your major skill sets and areas you may be wanting recruiters when they're typing into search in LinkedIn to take a look at. So for me, it would have defaulted to currently marketing director at the Congress of Neurological Surgeons. But instead I've updated mine to talk about nonprofit strategy, marketing, communications, membership, some of those areas that I really want to recruiters to hone in on. Or, now because I'm not in job search, if my board of directors is taking a look at my profile or someone searching for me in a volunteer capacity, these are areas where I'd want them to take note. And so you can go into the edit function of your LinkedIn profile. There are character limits for this section, so I would encourage you to play around with different words and see what you can get to fit in there. And also take a look at profiles of people that you really admire in your industry and take a look at how they're describing themselves. And perhaps you could pull out or extrapolate some of those keywords from their profiles. Next is the About section of your profile. And so this is all one big copy block, but I actually break it up into several different areas. And the first is about. So my about section begins with an elevator pitch. And what I mean by that is it's a high-level summary of what I would want someone to know about me. And I focus on hard skill keywords. And we'll get into keywords a little bit more in a later section as well. But when you think about hard skill keywords, what I mean by that is things that you have direct experience in, either through your work or through your education. So I'm talking about in my profile things like membership retention, strategy, marketing, leading cross-functional teams. So think about those hard skill keywords for yourself. And what's nice about this section of your profile too, is that you can really reuse this. Everyone should have an elevator pitch. And the reason why it's called an elevator pitch is because if you were to meet someone post-COVID times, because now we're socially distanced, in an elevator, and it was someone you really admired, and you had 30 seconds to a minute to talk yourself up, to make an impression, what would you say? And so having that elevator pitch in your back pocket is great for LinkedIn, but it's great for other uses too. For instance, I do speaker profiles for the different speaking engagements that I do. And so I can pull some of the information from the about section in my profile into those speaker bios. Next is the accomplishments section. And again, you'll see this is all one big copy block in your LinkedIn profile under about. So when you're looking at about and summary, again, this will be that one big copy block, but I chunk it up into these different areas. So if you're looking for something that specifically says accomplishments and summary, you won't see it, but that's something that I've chosen to do just to break up that profile and to include some bullets as well, some high-level information. So accomplishments is where I look globally at accomplishments across my career and try to note some specific things that I want to call out, not just underneath each job title, but globally across my resume. So I would advise 4 to 6 bullet points here, and I would focus this on really factual information, data-driven, quantifiable wins. So think numbers here if you can. So for instance, mine, I'm talking about the number of chapters I've overseen. I'm talking about revenue generation. Have you saved your organization or previous organizations a significant amount of money? Those sorts of things. Think again about quantifiable wins. Does it have a number in it? All right, so the next slide here is expertise. And again, this is all in that summary section of your profile. So I break it up into about, which is my elevator pitch, then accomplishments, which are those bullet points. And then finally, it's expertise. So these are additional hard skill keywords you didn't have room to include in that headline of your profile. So think about, again, hard skills or skills required to perform a job or something you obtained through your experience. And experience can include volunteer experience, or you've attained it through formal education, training programs, certification programs, things like that. But keep it brief and keep it high level. So again, you can see some of these for mine are membership, business development. When we get later into the presentation and I talk specifically about the keywords section of the LinkedIn profile, you can take a look at these 2 sections to extract some keywords either from that keywords section for up here, or to take some of these and pull them into your keywords section as well. But they don't all have to repeat. Look at how you can get the most bang for your buck and include the most different types of keywords. You want to think diversity there too, and I'll explain why in a little bit. So next is my favorite section of the LinkedIn profile that is so underutilized by folks. And I really hope that if you have one takeaway from the presentation today, it's to look at the media section of your profile. And why I love it is because LinkedIn can feel like a one-way communication as far as your profile. Like you're writing stuff, you're not really necessarily knowing who's looking at your profile if they're looking in private mode. You're not engaging with anyone through the profile itself. It can feel like you're just filling in these boxes or checking off boxes. But the media section is where you get to show some personality. So in the media section of your profile, you can link to articles, videos, photos, presentations. If you have any video content on yourself out there, I strongly encourage you to include it in the media section. And I'll give you an example of why. So in February, I was interviewing for a role. That role ended up not being the right fit for me, but it was, all interviews are a valuable process, in my opinion. And I had the hiring manager reach out to me, and he said, well, why don't we meet in person? And I was kind of thinking, well, I didn't do a phone screen. That's interesting. Typically, there would be a phone screen with either the hiring manager or, at a larger organization, HR. And so when we met in person, he actually mentioned why he did not do the phone screen. He said he had done the phone screen with all the other candidates he had been talking to, but he did not do the phone screen with me because he had gone to my LinkedIn profile and seen video content that I had put up. And he said, I'm typically using a phone screen to see how people present themselves and are they well-spoken. And because I was able to view your video content, I was able to bypass the phone screen with you and go straight to the in-person video or in-person interview. So if you can include video content, I think that's great. I'll share a quick tip from me that I'll also mention a little bit more about later in the presentation. And that is, I do different speaking engagements. And one thing I will always offer to do, even if it's not asked for explicitly, is that I'll get out my iPhone. I know I am not somebody who's an expert on video editing. I know as much as I'm sure most of you on this call do about that, perhaps less. But I have an iPhone tripod. My favorite trade show giveaway I've ever gotten. It's come in handy way more than I ever thought it would. And I set up my phone and I'll shoot a quick testimonial, 30 to 45 seconds. And then I'll ask that organization to post it on their YouTube or share it on their social media. And then what that allows me to do is I can link to that in the media section of my profile. So it's a great way to be a value add if you're a volunteer or a presenter, be a value add to that organization. Almost no organization is going to turn down extra promotion for an event or a course or an awards program. And it allows you to build up your personal brand and include more rich media on your profile. Next is experience. So most of us have listed experience on our profile as far as companies, but not gone beyond that. So when I talk about a bare bones LinkedIn profile, that's what I'm really talking about. Like, you have listed your organization, but you have provided no details on what you did. So I would look at including the organizations you've worked. You don't have to include all of them. You can keep it to what's really relevant for what you're doing now or for what you hope to do in the future. But pull out your resume or CV or pull out old job descriptions, and you can pull a lot of content from that for your experience section of your profile. Another thing to do, and this is a pet peeve of mine, I've circled a little CNS logo, is when you include your organization name, you can type that into LinkedIn, and if that organization has a page on LinkedIn, it will populate an image next to that job title. So play around with how you're typing in organization names. For instance, I'm going to be working at the American College of Medical Quality. It could be listed under ACMQ, or it could be listed under American College of Medical Quality. Play around with that and see if you can get something to pop up, and then use whatever verbiage is popping up there so that you can populate that logo. Next is education, licenses, and certifications. This is where you'll want to list all your undergraduate or graduate education if you have it, as well as any relevant licenses, certifications. And one area of LinkedIn I have a quibble with is there's nowhere that's specifically stated to list certificates. And those of you who are working in meetings on the scientific content or education sides probably are familiar with the difference between a certification and a certificate. So certification programs are certainly a bit more robust. Generally, they require you to renew that certification. They're viewed in a little bit different manner than a certificate. However, there's nowhere, as I mentioned, on the LinkedIn profiles specifically or explicitly to list certificates. So what I've chosen to do, and I actually talked to one of the organizations where I did a certificate program and asked them for their thoughts as well. And both of us were kind of on the same page with thinking it should be listed under licenses and certifications. But what I make sure to do so that folks know that I'm not claiming that it's a certification is to put certificate. So again, certifications and certificates can go in this area as well as any relevant licenses. And if there are expiration dates for those, i.e. you need to renew them, which most certification programs do have, you should list that date as well. And you don't have to be completely explicit. You can list month and year. Next, volunteer experience. This is another favorite area of mine for the LinkedIn profile. That was interesting that 82% of recruiters prefer candidates with volunteer experience. I know as a hiring manager, I always look towards volunteer experience in candidates because it shows me somebody who's really interested in going above and beyond. So here's where you can add information about volunteer experience. So I list board of directors for Ever Thrive Illinois. I have not included a lot of detail there, and the reason was because I just started with that board in June, so I don't have a lot of accomplishments or anything there to tout quite yet. But I've been involved with Association Forum as their content working group co-chair for a few years now. So I've listed a little bit more detail there. I would keep it to 1 to 2 sentences. I wouldn't do anything really beyond that, pretty high level stuff. Next is skills and endorsements. So this is a nice area of the profile as well, especially when recruiters are looking for you. Skills and endorsements are big, and I'll tell you why. A lot of organizations are posting positions on LinkedIn right now. So if you're hiring for a candidate, and what you'll see is that they will have a list of skills, and then you can match up your skills to the skills for that position. So when a recruiter is looking at your profile, they can see how many skills you've listed on your profile that then correspond with that specific position. You can list up to 50 hard skill keywords, and I would definitely take advantage of all 50 if you can. This is another area as well where you want to play in and play around with what LinkedIn will pre-populate. Sometimes as a marketer, it bugs me because I'm like an editor, grammarian at heart, and some of the stuff is capitalized, title case, some of it's not, bugs me a little bit, but you're still better off selecting the pre-populated skill whenever you can. So for instance, if you were going to type in project management, you may want to start typing in the word project and then see what will come in after that. You can also take skill quizzes now. Personally, this isn't necessarily super relevant for our industry, but it's something to watch. And the reason I say it's not super relevant yet is most of the skill quizzes are related to technical stuff, programming type stuff, but there are some related to the Microsoft suite. So you could look at taking advantage of those. And what you'll do is take a 10 to 15 question quiz that LinkedIn has put together. And if you pass that quiz, then you will receive an endorsement for that skill. Finally is accomplishments, and this is another area where I see people overlooking on their profile. You can list publications, projects, honors, and awards. And if you would click on, if you're looking at my profile and you would click on that little caret, you see greater detail, but I would include links wherever possible. For instance, I did a 40 under 40 or received a 40 under 40 award with Association Forum. I include just a sentence about that award and then a link to the page on Association Forum's website where you can see that I received that award. So it's just a little bit of verification to, in fact, prove that you achieved these things. So that's the profile section. I know I've gone through a lot of content there. Again, feel free to ask questions at the end of the presentation, to refer to the document I'll be sharing, or to connect with me on LinkedIn and have a one-to-one discussion with me afterwards. I would be happy to do that with any of you on the webinar today. So next we're going to talk about creating and engaging with content, which I think is so important, especially in the virtual world we live in right now. And when I think about content for LinkedIn, I have 3 C's. I call them create, curate, and care. So focus on what insights, perspectives, and experiences you can share. How can you be of service to your peers? So really the big picture here is how can you add value? I see sometimes people thinking LinkedIn is like a self-serving platform, kind of like I mentioned about with a personal brand earlier. But as much as you're promoting, look to promote and provide value to others. Next is how to share your content on a LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has made some strides in this area. It used to be that you could create short form posts on LinkedIn, but now there's a LinkedIn blogging platform as well. And I've seen a lot of people take advantage of this lately. It's a great way to be able to show off some of your writing if that's an area where you're comfortable. So LinkedIn has what I kind of call like a WordPress-light blogging platform built into it, where you can create your own articles and blog posts and then share those out. LinkedIn also has its own video component now. That's something that I believe they've launched within the last year or so. And then you can also pull in and share documents, links to documents from outside of the LinkedIn platform. Next, I want to talk about how you extend your reach. So, for instance, you can post on LinkedIn, but how do you get the most views for that post? And then how can you repurpose content? So I've shared an example of a post that I developed a number of months ago. These have been challenging times, but I really wanted to focus on thinking about value and service to others, as I mentioned earlier. And so for me, when I'm feeling overwhelmed in my work, I try to come back and thinking about what our industry, what we do, how we serve others, why that's important, what the big picture is. So I just posed a question. I asked, why are associations important right now? And I'll explain a few reasons why this post got some good reach. 1, include a picture whenever you can. Photos are just going to get more interest than a text-only post. And that's a rule across any social media platform. Always include an image if you can. Next is hashtags. So you can use hashtags within the LinkedIn platform, kind of like you can on Twitter. And so hashtags are used, you can use them to get more views for your posts, because people sometimes will type a hashtag in and use it to search for content across that hashtag. So it's a great way to organize content and to look for the content that's relevant for you. Much like hard skill keywords, you should look towards how you can pre-populate that content. So as you use a hashtag and start to type it into your post, you'll see if that's a relevant hashtag or not, because it will pre-populate. So always play around to try and build on hashtags that are already popular within the platform. But I also encourage you to not go too popular. I try to kind of look at something mid-level, like are a few thousand people searching for this? Because for me, that's, I feel, going to get me more views than if I'm in the larger pool with somebody who's talking about hashtag management, and there are thousands of posts a day across hashtag management. The other way I extended the reach on this post was to pose a question. So I asked people in the association community to talk about why associations are important right now. Why do they think what they're doing, our industry, why is that relevant? And I got some great answers. And so what I did was I went to one of the associations where I volunteer, and I said, there are some great answers here. Would you guys be interested in me taking this content and creating it into a blog post? So first it was a LinkedIn post, then it became a blog post. And then that organization shared that blog post across all of their socials. So we were able to repurpose that content 3 times over. So look at ways you could take some of your post content and make that into something else. Next, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on InMail. InMail is, I think, the pet peeve and the bane of the existence of a lot of folks right now. I think a lot of people feel like they don't want to go onto the LinkedIn platform or have abandoned the LinkedIn platform a little bit because you feel like every time you go on there, you are being solicited by someone for something. So I would get creative with InMail, and here are a few tips. First, be selective. Unless you have a premium profile, you will only receive a limited quantity of outbound InMail messages that you can send per month. So really think about what the most high value messaging who are those high value targets? If you could reach somebody in an email and you already have their email address, then maybe LinkedIn is not necessarily what you want to use to reach out to them. Next, get personal. Personalize it. Look for common interests, connections, work experiences, educational experiences, and mention those when you're talking to somebody. Also, be brief. Most InMails, I believe over 70%, are read on mobile devices rather than on a computer. So think about that and think about the scroll fatigue when you are creating messages in InMail. Finally, create a call to action. What do you want the recipient to do? Ask a question, or even better yet, suggest some value that you might be able to provide to that person. And then a final tip that I didn't note on the slide, but I wanted to note while talking to you is InMail, sometimes it's not necessarily viewed like it. There are first degree, second degree, and third degree connections on LinkedIn. So first degree are people you've already connected with. Second degree are folks that you haven't connected with, but you have connections in common. And then third degree, you have no connections in common. If you're trying to InMail someone who's 3 degrees away from you, there's a high likelihood they're not going to read that message. So if you're really trying to get in touch with somebody, for instance, you wanted to speak to a hiring manager, an HR professional about a job lead, and you wanted to send an InMail message, go to that person's profile. You can browse on private, change your settings and browse on private, and see if you have any connections in common. If you have a good connection in common, reach out to that person and ask them if they would make an introduction. A communication where you are already tied in some way through a common connection or experience is going to be more valued and have a higher likelihood of being read. Next is enhancing your personal SEO. SEO, for those of you not familiar, stands for search engine optimization. So for instance, like when you type something into Google, what are the first few results that pop up? Those are really search engine optimized results. They have included relevant keywords or interesting details on that website that have led them to be at the top of the search. So you've probably all done this before, but I encourage you to do it again. Google yourself, type in your name, and also you'll want to see who else has your name. Like for instance, there is an interior designer in Dallas with the same name as me. And so we're always battling it out for the top placements when you search our name. Next, an all-star LinkedIn profile is going to really improve your SEO. When you type in somebody's name, one of the first results that will likely pop up on that first page of results is that individual's LinkedIn page, if he or she has one. Next, our interviews are on other websites. So have you talked to a publication or someone like that and done guest interviews? There's lots of ways to get involved in being interviewed or to create your own articles or blog posts. So next is guest articles and blogs. I write for a number of publications in the association industry. And, if you do a search on publications, websites in your industry, you'll likely find a lot of them have areas of their website that talk about how you can submit guest articles and the requirements for those guest articles. If you can't find that on the website itself, you could either reach out to their customer service or better yet, their marketing department and ask them if they would be interested in guest articles or blogs. I definitely don't feel like you need to be an expert author. Interviewing other people, doing a Q&A type article is a great way to get your feet wet with creating guest article content. And then finally, video. Rich media really improves your SEO. It's excellent for your SEO. So again, when I talked earlier about that media section on your profile, what's great too is all those videos that are on YouTube or on other websites, those will likely also come up when people are searching for your name. So the more rich media you have, the better. So I know we've gone through a lot of content today. I wanted to just pause for a moment to take a look at some questions and touch base on anything anyone is unsure of or wanted to have a quick chat about. I noticed we have a few questions here already, so I'll answer those first and then feel free to send in some more questions as well. So B was asking, curious to know if you have stats on recruiters looking at other social media platforms. So I did not pull that specifically for today's presentation, but I think that's a really interesting question. I can talk to you about that, not necessarily from a statistical perspective, but just from me as a hiring manager. I certainly do look across candidates' social media platforms when I'm looking at bringing somebody on. And I'm looking to see if they're presenting themselves in a professional manner, if there's anything that really stands out. I mean, I'm not going back 5 years to see what you were tweeting about, the burrito that you ate 5 years ago. But I certainly am looking to see if there's anything that stands out. Like I've seen things where I've seen people complain about their jobs on social media. Those are the sorts of things that are immediately a red flag as a hiring manager. For me, I was asked at a different personal branding session I did a few months ago, why do you really concentrate on LinkedIn? And so the reason for me is both personal and professional. One is that's the area where I really feel the most comfortable and feel like I'm getting the most bang for my buck from a personal branding perspective. I really want to focus my personal brand more on what I'm doing in the professional realm. And so I know I'm committed to a lot of different areas. And so for me, I can't commit to too many different areas of my personal brand as far as social media. So I'm putting more of my eggs in that basket because this is where recruiters are, this is where hiring managers are, and this is where I'm talking about content specifically related to career, which is really of interest to me. But I would say if you're looking across other social platforms to establish your personal brand, probably the next one I'd look at after LinkedIn is Twitter, and look at Twitter around specifically, if you're trying to build your personal brand, I would square in on and trying to be an expert in whatever that area is. Rather than having your personal Twitter where you also mix in business content. So if you're going to be doing business content across any other socials, I would create separate pages for that business content or separate accounts. So another question that came through is, when managing a corporate LinkedIn page, should that page be open access or closed to only members? Pros and cons for both. So I think that's a great question. Also, before we delve into that, I think I'll take a step back. For company pages, you can do a page or you can do a group. And there are pros and cons to both. So for a page, it's really more one-way communication. I mean, there are opportunities to communicate with an organization or a brand on a company page. I do think every company should have a company page, because that can serve as like your landing page. That can serve as the place where you put your mission statement. That can serve as the place where you link back to your website, and those sorts of things. A group page is what you would want to take a look at if you want to foster more group chatter. Now, my caution with groups is that I think LinkedIn groups, and I know LinkedIn's trying to work on this, have become really spammy of late. Not a lot of two-way dialogue, a lot of like, okay, well, here, take a look at my XYZ that I'm trying to sell, rather than a lot of communication going back and forth. But the upside to a group is, if you're a marketer for an organization, is that you can send out in mail to everyone within that group. I believe that's once a week. So you can, on a company page, you're not able to send out that type of messaging. But on a group page, if you want to look at sending that in mail to a group, you can achieve that through a group page. So that is incredibly helpful. Not seeing any other questions at the moment.
No, Amy, that was the only questions. And at this point, we do probably need to wrap up. Thank you so much for the session today. And thank you all for your patience as we work through our technical challenges. You'll be able to reach the next breakouts, which just have gotten started. If you go back, all the links are live on the breakout page if you go back to the lobby. So thanks so much. And thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.